Let me know if you're all set. Okay. Fellow Ambazonians, welcome to this very special edition of the State of the Struggle. I am your Communication Secretary, Chris Ann. I want to believe that every one of us out there had a wonderful, happy New Year, in spite of all the trials and the struggles that we as a nation we are going through. This is a very premier edition of this broadcast called The State of the Struggle. And I promise to come to you once every week to inform you, to enlighten you what the interim government is doing with the struggle, to brief you with the updates, the new developments, the state of the war, and whatever that the interim government is pursuing. We want to build a government, or we are building a government in which we want it to be accountable to the people that it governs. And you are the people. The government is your government. We are not responsible to ourselves. We are responsible to you. One of the reasons why we are packing out of La République du Cameroon is because of the form, of the nature, the type of system that they operated, in which only a clique of people understood what goes on in the government. But here in Ambazonia, we are building a system that educate our people. We want our people to understand, to be up to date with what this interim government is doing. Every single initiative that we are taking here to take us to Biya. And that is the reason why I decided to launch this special informative program, The State of the Struggle. And every week, I'll be coming to you maybe sometimes twice a week, maybe sometimes just once a week. If there are emergency situations I need to come on, I will come on and brief you, whatever that it is. But we shall make sure that this comes to you every week, once every week. And again, I want to appreciate you. Allow me to come unto you today to share with you recent developments in our struggle. Of course, you know, we just walked into the new year. I want to believe that each and every one of you out there had a wonderful new year, even including our refugees in the camp. I am a minister, and I want you to know that I believe that no matter the condition in which you find yourself, you can still enjoy your life to the fullest. And so in spite of the fact that you may be a refugee, you still have to enjoy your life to the fullest, because there is no certainty, there is no assurance that tomorrow you will have that piece of life still with you. And so again, thank you for allowing me to come to you today to share with you certain things which have been taking place right here with the interim government. And I want to speak specifically today on a number of issues. Number one, I will be talking about the speech of His Excellency Sisiko Julius Ayuk-Tabi on New Year's Eve. And I will also be speaking about the speech of Paul Biya, President of La République du Cameroon, on New Year's Eve too. But before I get there, I like really to call your attention to the fundraising that took place a few days ago, New Year's Eve in the Maryland metropolis. I really want to appreciate the turnout and the generosity of every individual, every man and woman who turn out and generously put their hands in their pockets to donate towards the upkeep of our refugees in Nigeria. I have always said that all of us who live in the diaspora, there is nothing else that we can do except or other than put our hands in our pockets and give for their own upkeeps. Many of them have deserted their homes, they deserted their farms, they deserted their businesses, not by their own liking, but because of the brutality of the regime in La République du Cameroon. And so long as they live in Nigeria, so long as they live in refugee camps, we owe them that responsibility to help them to survive this time. And so really I want to appreciate every man, every woman who came out in Maryland last week to put their hands in their pocket to be a blessing to our refugees in Nigeria. The people, the brothers and the sisters in Maryland, they set a tremendous example. And going forward, I want to believe that everyone in every city in America, in Europe, in Canada, will take the example of what the people in Maryland did and begin to donate generously towards this revolution. There is no way we are going to fund this revolution other than through you and me. If there is no money, there is no way we're going to get to Biya. It will take tremendous amount of money to take us to Biya. And so my appeal to every one of us is, we owe ourselves. We owe those who have died. We owe those who are in refugee camps. We owe those who are struggling on the ground, finances, to see that we take this revolution to the expected end. And again, I really want to appeal to everybody, everywhere else other than in the city or the state of Maryland, where they came out last week and donated generously towards the upkeep of the refugees in Nigeria. The baton is being passed around. I understand that Dallas is coming up very, very soon. So please, if you live in Dallas, get ready. Begin to think of what you can do. We must take care of every single refugee in Nigeria. Some are mothers, they are pregnant, they will be delivering soon, and they need maternity help. Please, begin to think of what you can do. Let's donate generously to lift up this struggle to the next level. Again, I come to you today to speak to you about the address that the president of the interim government made on New Year's Eve. And of course, I will also be talking about the address that the president of La République du Cameroon, Paul Biya, made also on New Year's Eve. And I would like to begin with the address presented by the president of La République du Cameroon, Paul Biya. Now, in Paul Biya's speech, Paul Biya mentioned a number of things. He mentioned dialogue. I'm sorry, let me put it this way. Lots of people have anticipation. In fact, before Mr. Biya came out to deliver his address to La République, in fact, let me put it this way also. That address was delivered to La République du Cameroon. Paul Biya's address wasn't delivered to us, Ambazonians. It wasn't meant for us Ambazonians. Paul Biya's speech was meant for people in La République du Cameroon. So maybe asking me why. The reason is simple. Since October 1st, 2017, we declared our nation restored. We restored our independence, our sovereignty. And so whatever that is done in La République du Cameroon is not done for us. No instructions, no orders that are passed in La République du Cameroon apply to us. They may still be living in unbelief. They may still be thinking that, oh, Cameroon is still one and indivisible. Cameroon is no longer one and indivisible. We have two countries in that little sub-region. The Federal Republic of Ambazonia and the La République du Cameroon. So the point is, Paul Biya, let's get this home. Paul Biya wasn't addressing Ambazonians when he came over television on New Year's Eve. He was addressing his citizens in La République du Cameroon. Now, but a lot of people, because of the crisis ongoing, lots of people were waiting to hear Mr. Biya pronounce, an inclusive dialogue coming up. Lots of people were expecting to hear a release or the release of prisoners. Mr. Biya missed the opportunity to make history, to say, for the first time since this crisis began, I am summoning inclusive dialogue. We recall that the Secretary General of the Commonwealth was only very recently in Cameroon. And one word, one message that resonated from our mouth wherever she went was inclusive dialogue. Also, we have heard the word inclusive dialogue from the United Nations, from the European Parliament, from the European nations. Everywhere, the talk has been inclusive dialogue. And you would think that providing the opportunity of the new year, Mr. Biya will step out and say, I am summoning an inclusive dialogue that will bring everybody to the round table so we can discuss on the fate of the crisis. Mr. Biya did not. He rejected the idea, as he has always done from the beginning. Many people also thought he was going to release lots of Amazonian prisoners who were held in Yaoundé, in Bamenda, in Biya, in Bafoussam, in Douala. Mr. Biya did not release any prisoner. And so he missed the opportunity to demonstrate once for all good faith in resolving this crisis. And let me take you back a little bit. This crisis began in October 2016 when lawyers and teachers came out, demanded reforms in the legal system, in the educational system. They called for dialogue to discuss the crisis. Mr. Biya's regime rejected the dialogue. But what Mr. Biya said in his speech 3 days ago on New Year's Eve was, he has already conducted dialogue. The question is, with whom has he conducted dialogue? Mr. Biya has not conducted dialogue with anybody. In fact, Mr. Biya was talking about this crisis officially for the first time last New Year's Eve. There has been no dialogue since the crisis started. If there was dialogue, school will not still be hanging out. If there was dialogue, our lawyers will not still be sitting home. If there was dialogue, there wouldn't be any ghost town going on. If there was dialogue, there won't be people still running to exiles. If there was dialogue, there won't be any war going on in Manfred today. So just as his regime is a failed regime, Mr. Biya himself is a failed president of La République du Cameroon. Now, Mr. Biya refused to talk dialogue. That is demonstrative of the fact that he is not ready to resolve this crisis. Now, I note one thing that Mr. Biya said. He congratulated his army, congratulated his soldiers for their bravery in slaughtering our people, in slaughtering Ambazonians, and sending thousands of them to exile. As I speak, we have over 40,000 Ambazonians who have escaped from their homes in Manfe, Eyumojok, F.R.A, or you can name the rest. There are thousands who have escaped their homes and they are living in refugee camps in Nigeria. And Mr. Biya, who calls himself the president of one and indivisible Cameroon, did not spare a moment. He did not spare 1 minute to mention those refugees. He did not spare a second to talk about the plight of those refugees. But again, that tells you the kind of person that he is and the fact that he is not ready to reconcile, to summon an inclusive dialogue. It also drives home the message that they don't recognize us, they don't see us Ambazonians as the history has always been. La République du Cameroon, they do not recognize us as people that they should care about. That is why their governor can call us dogs. I mean, the governor up in the southwest, Bernard Okalia, he can call us dogs, and their journalists on TV can call us names too in their own border. But when English journalists write reports, critical reports, they are arrested and they are jailed, and their publications are suspended, and their media houses are also suspended. We do not care as far as Cameroon is concerned. We don't care to La République du Cameroon, at least their leaders. And so Biya missed an opportunity to demonstrate to Ambazonians and the international community that he is indeed interested in dialogue. We did not see that. What Mr. Biya mentioned in his address was one, the expedition of the functionality of the so-called Mosonge Commission. Number two, the second thing that he mentioned was the so-called swift implementation of decentralization. Number three, he also referred to us, Ambazonians, fighting to defend ourselves. He referred to us as terrorists and extremists. And then Biya went further to say that he is expecting the African Cup of Nations to be hosted in Cameroon. Of course, he meant Cameroon, including the southern Cameroons or Ambazonia. Then he went ahead to mention, talked about elections holding in 2018. Now, I want you to understand, I said something from the beginning. And I said, Biya's address on New Year's Eve wasn't to you and me who are Ambazonians or Southern Cameroonians. Biya's address was to Francophones. Now, that is to say that when Mr. Biya stands over TV and says he is going to expedite decentralization, we want him to know this interim government of Ambazonia wants Mr. Biya and his administration to understand that Ambazonia, the land, the territory, the people of the southern Cameroons have nothing to do with anything coming out from La République du Cameroon. we shall not be entertaining any form of election organized in our territory by La République du Cameroon. We are sending a message to every parliamentarian, every councillor, everyone who plans on taking part in any election organized by La République du Cameroon in our territory, that such an election is not taking place. The only election that we may be anticipating that will be entertained will be an election that calls for a referendum that allows us, that allows you to vote to determine what form of state we want to assume. And let me say something. Mr. Biya failed to mention federation. I'm wondering what our federal brothers are thinking right now. Our federal brothers have been singing federation, 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 federation ever since the crisis began. And they thought that was the easiest way to resolve this crisis. Unfortunately, year-round, Mr. Biya has refused to entertain even the idea of a federation. Let me ask you, if you are a federalist out there, what more reason do you have to believe that Mr. Biya is going to call or summon a federal constitution? If after all these months, it is more than a year today, if after all this time, Mr. Biya cannot summon a constitutional conference that redefines the structure of government in Cameroon that includes a federation, what makes you to think today, what makes you to believe today that you are going to have federation? One thing is sure, total independence remains the only option that we have on the table here. And we are resolved. This interim government of Ambazonia is resolved. There is no going back to La République du Cameroon in any form of structure or government that they put in place. We are not interested in a federation. We are not interested in a federal state. Neither are we interested in any form of decentralization. La République can decentralize its territories. But Ambazonia, the territory of Ambazonia, isn't going to be part of any decentralization conducted by La République du Cameroon. We want the message to get to them very clearly. We are not, Ambazonia, the southern Cameroons, is not going back to live with La République du Cameroon, neither in the federation nor in a decentralized state. Now, as I said, Biya was addressing his people. He wasn't addressing us. And so if he thinks for a second that they will be organizing elections in the southern Cameroons, I tell you that is a lie. It is not going to happen. And neither is the Cup of Nations going to take place in the southern Cameroons, unless in the sovereign southern Cameroon. That is the only moment we are going to participate in the hosting of any Cup of Nations in the southern Cameroons. Ambazonia has to be free. It would not be free with La République du Cameroon dictating to us. Now let me get to the speech delivered by our president, Sisiko Julius Ayoktabe. There were a number of things that he listed in his speech. And people have been asking ever before then, what is the way forward? What is the way forward for the struggle? I think the entire speech of the president outlined precisely what the way forward for this struggle is. And if you listen to the speech, I am very convinced you left there having no doubt what the direction of this government and the way forward for this revolution is. I am going to mention a number of things which I consider very important, and let me start with the school resumption subject. If you did listen to the president, he made it very clear that it would be unwise and insensitive on the part of the interim government to ask children to go back to school, knowing that somewhere else in our country, in our territory, there are those who cannot go to school. Now we realize that before the fourth conclave, the interim or the governing council announced that if certain conditions were met, that schools were going to resume on January 8th. Now, January 8th is only a matter of days to come. But the interim government or the governing council had announced that if all the conditions were fulfilled, schools were going to resume on January 8th. And the conditions, certain conditions were put before the government of La République du Cameroon. And the conditions were the unconditional release of Mancho BBC and all the other detainees who are being held in Yaoundé, in Bamenda, in Biya, in all other detention centers across the country. That was the first condition. The unconditional release of Mancho BBC and other teachers and students who are being held in detention across the country. Number two, we asked La République du Cameroon to withdraw all their troops from our streets, in our towns, in our cities, so that parents are assured of security as they send their children to school. These were the two major conditions which we gave the interim government, or the governor council then gave La République du Cameroon. Now, as I speak to you, as I come to you today, none of those conditions has been met. And as the president stated in his New Year address, when you look at the condition in which we find ourselves in today, bringing the Manfe factor into consideration, we are in a worse situation than what it was by October. Then we only ask for troops to lead the street. But when you look at a picture today, you realize that we even have more troops on our street than what we had then. Now we have soldiers, police officers moving door to door and arresting people, torturing them, brutalizing them, shooting them, and killing them. Is this the atmosphere in which we want to let our children go to school? What about all the prisoners who are in jail? There are teachers who are in jail. There are students who are in jail who must also go to school. If we allow children to go to school today, what happened to those other students? What happened to those teachers? And what about what is going on in Manfe today? In Manfe, there is no student around. The schools are shut down, not because the children don't want to go to school or nobody wants to go to school. We all remember the communique that was sent out by the senior divisional officer, the colonial divisional officer for Manfe, asking everybody to leave Manu. And everybody is out of town. Those who were left, many have been killed. So everybody is left running for his or her life. The military has pulled in machine guns, artillery, ammunition, weapons of mass destruction into Manfe, and they are daily killing people. And as I said some time ago, we will never know, we can never know the amount of people, the number of people who have been killed in Manfe, but probably not until when this war is over. We have majority of people, the majority of the people of Manu, they live in Nigeria. How then can we say that children go back to school, knowing that if the rest of the people go back to school, the people of Manfe, the teachers in Manfe, the students in Manfe, they cannot go back to school? It is for this reason that the interim government sat down and they thought it would be unwise and insensitive to ask students to go back to school when these other students cannot go back to school. And so we laid down some conditions. And the conditions are these. Again, the interim government is asking for the withdrawal of all La République du Cameroon's troops from our street, from Manu, from everywhere in the southern Cameroons, to create an atmosphere of security to enable the children to go back to school. Until this is done, no child is going back to school in the southern Cameroons. We cannot be living in our own country as slaves. We cannot be living in our own country in chains. We are asking La République du Cameroon to withdraw all her troops from our towns and cities and streets so that our children can securely go back to the classrooms. The second condition has to also do with the unconditional release of Mancho BBC and the other teachers and students who are still being held in prisons across Cameroon. Until those people are all released, we are not going to encourage anyone to go to school. That is a condition. Those are the conditions that the interim government is putting in place. When these conditions are all fulfilled, we will see the need to step out and encourage everyone, all students and all the parents, to release their children back to school. And I want to appeal to all the parents who are listening to me or watching right now. It is for the security, this is for the security of your children. I want to encourage you, please, this war has only just started. Things are only going to get worse. And so if you love your children, please hold them home, keep them home. Don't let them out beginning January 8th to go to school. And we realize that over the few months, most of the schools in the urban areas and city areas have defied the order, sending their children to school. I want to encourage you. I'm not intimidating, I'm just trying to encourage you. Please, for the security, for the safety of your children, don't let them go to school because things will only get worse. Until these conditions are fulfilled, the interim government of Ambazonia is not going to encourage students returning to school. That is it. Now, other people have asked, or many people are asking about what the interim government is doing with self-defense. Many people have asked questions. Why is the interim government not coming on the ground and fighting and waging a full-scale war against La République du Cameroon? I want you to understand that there are very many things that we cannot come here and say over the television. But I want you to rest assured that your interim government is putting everything in place. We are putting everything in place. We have every option on the table, and we are weighing all those options. When the moment comes, when the time comes, you won't have to ask those questions anymore. But for now, we are still using diplomacy, giving enough time, monitoring the situation on the ground. When the time comes, when the moment comes, we will take that option, and you should have no doubt about that. Right now, what the interim government is doing is encouraging every self-defense group If you fear for your life, do not hesitate to defend yourself. The right to self-defense is part of the United Nations Charter that calls for individuals or groups to protect themselves. It's a right that we all have. And so why the interim government is not right now carrying out any self-defense or any military, any warfare on the ground, we are not discouraging anyone who sees the need, or any group that sees the need to carry out self-defense to protect themselves and protect their families. Also, the president also talked about elections and the position of the interim government towards concerning the elections which Paul Biya announced. Over the past 1 year, the interim government has been appealing to our parliamentarians, our senators, to withdraw, to take the courage of our leaders of 1953 to walk away from La République du Cameroon's parliament, just as our ancestors did in 1953 when they walked away from the Eastern House of Assembly in Enugu, Nigeria. When they walked away to form the state of the Southern Cameroons, British Southern Cameroons, the interim government or the president in his New Year's address appealed to all our parliamentarians, our senators, to come back home, join the struggle. We are waiting for you. We are waiting to embrace you. We are asking for you to come back, withdraw, come back to Biya. Let us build our nation. There is no hope for you and for us, for our country in Yaoundé. 56 years has proven that we have no hope over there. And so, the position of this interim government as outlined on New Year's Eve by the President, Sisiko Ayub Tabi, is for all our parliamentarians and senators to come back home. Do not think, do not imagine that as La République calls for elections this year, that there are going to be any elections conducted by La République in our territory. No, there will be no elections in the Southern Cameroon organized by La République du Cameroon. And so our appeal, the appeal of the interim government to every parliamentarian and senator out there of the Southern Cameroon's origin is to begin, if I were you, I begin to ask myself, what can I do? What can we do to reconstitute our House of Assembly in Biya? Begin to listen to your constituents. None of your constituents wants you to return to Yaoundé. And so this is a moment for you to have a soul search. Ask yourself, I have been in Yaoundé for all these years. Look at what the Honorable Weber did in Yaoundé. Look at what we did in Yaoundé for the past session. They all humiliated you. They prefer to shut down parliament than listen to you, than listen to your appeals or listen to your petitions. So the interim government is asking you, what do you think you are going to Yaoundé to go and achieve if they can refuse to listen to your appeal to the Anglophone, the Southern Cameroon's Ambazonian situation that you presented in Parliament? And so the interim government is saying there is going to be no election in the Southern Cameroons organized by La République du Cameroon. The appeal is for you, all our senators, all our parliamentarians, to right now begin to liaise among yourselves and onto the interim government. We want to work together with you. We want to work with you to build a new country, this new country where everyone has hope, where everyone is treated equally, where everyone has true representation. We want to work with you. The interim government wants to work with you. And so the appeal of the president is, please consider joining this revolution. Let us build our country, a better country. And the president also talked about the effort, the diplomatic efforts that the interim government is doing to get recognition for our country. Again, there are certain things that we cannot reveal to you here because they are classified. But we want you to know that in a few months, very, very few months to come, we are going to be having recognitions by some other nations. And once that begins to happen, you can expect to see our passports being used around the world, our ID cards being issued for our citizens. That is going to come very, very soon. We are hoping that before the end of February, we're going to be having nations, we're going to be having countries that endorse, that recognize our nationhood. That is something that we are working on right now to achieve. And I've talked about school resumption. I've talked about self-defense. I've talked about the diplomatic recognition. I've talked about Parliament and the Senate elections, which are the things that the president addressed during his New Year's speech. Now, there are a number of things that I also like to bring to you. I've seen people ask questions about SCBC. Who owns SCBC, Southern Cameroon Broadcasting Corporation? Again, I want you to have no doubt, SCBC falls under the Department of Communications, which I manage. I want you to have no doubt that the SCBC is owned by this interim government. It's owned by you, the people of the Southern Cameroons. It has not been traded. It has not been sold. It has not been leased either. Now, in October, a board was formed. The place of the board in SCBC was basically meant to manage the finances of the corporation. I understand that those who came out with the idea of the board thought if the management of SCBC was placed in the hands of the board will be able to go out there in the regions, raise finances from the regions that should take care of the bills at SCBC. That is why a board was created. But even so, that board still falls under the supervision of the Department of Communication. I hope this lays this to rest eternally. So SCBC is your property. It's being funded by you, no other entity. And also, I want to talk about ghost towns. Some people are asking whether ghost towns should remain or whether ghost towns they should stay. Of course, ghost towns are not taking place every day as it used to be in the past. This is the way that we are implementing ghost towns. Henceforth, ghost towns will only come up when we deem necessary. We know that lots of people have paid a lot of sacrifice in ghost towns, especially the business community. What the interim government is trying to do is make sure that ghost towns only show up when it is absolutely necessary. And so you can rest assured that we're not going to be having ghost towns for 3 days, for 1 week, anytime soon. But when necessity calls, you can rest assured we will call for ghost towns. And then, as I mentioned from the beginning, I have some announcement to make coming from the interim government. And after I make the announcement, I will be taking some questions. I will be answering some questions that some people sent in. And this announcement has to do with new appointments into the presidency of the Federal Republic of Amazonia. And this is duly signed by the president. I don't know whether you can see that. You can see that they are duly signed by him. And if I can read what is here, it says, by the authority vested in me. Now, this is the president speaking, not me. By the authority vested in me, I hereby make the following appointments to improve the operational efficiency and effectiveness in the presidency of the Federal Republic of Amazonia. Chief, number 1, Chief of Staff at the presidency, Iyambe Elango. 2, Director of Administration at the presidency, Barrister Nalowa B. Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the presidency, Tangu Richard. Director of Cabinet Affairs at the presidency, Chief Asaba Nkengfua Mofobene. Deputy Director of Cabinet Affairs at the presidency, Justine Mbang. Director of Protocol and International Relations at the presidency, Dr. Bernadette Ategan. Director of Communications and Digital Strategy at the presidency, Dr. Victor Asaa Akwinga. Director of Political Strategy and Outreach, Godfred Inti. Deputy Director of Political Strategy and Outreach, Robert Fondi. Director of Finance at the presidency, B. Kuko Tabot. And lastly, Director of Project Management at the presidency, Dr. Ekome Zoge Metuge. That name is jaw-breaking. Sorry about that. Again, these were the new appointment coming from the interim, from the president. He is not interim president. We have an interim government. We don't have an interim president. We have a president. So these are the new appointments coming from the president of the interim government. Again, the names, number 1, quickly, Chief of Staff at the presidency, Iyambe Elango. Director of Administration at the presidency, Barrister Nalowa B. Director of Intergovernmental Affairs at the presidency, Tangu Richard. Director of Cabinet Affairs at the presidency, Chief Asaba Nkemfo Mofobene. Deputy Director of Cabinet Affairs at the presidency, Justine Mbang. Director of Protocol and International Relations at the presidency, Dr. Bernadette Ategan. Director of Communications and Digital Strategy at the presidency, Dr. Victor Asaa. Director of Political Strategy and Outreach, Godfred Inti. Deputy Director of Political Strategy and Outreach, Robert Fondi. Director of Finance at the presidency, B. Kuko Tabot. And Director of Project Management at the presidency, Dr. Metuge. All right. Right now, I'm going to answer a number of questions here, which some people put in on social media. Yesterday, I put out a post asking for people to post their questions to me, and I will randomly pick them up and answer them. Now, I have a number of questions here. The first one is from, I'm sorry, I'm having bad eyes here. It's from Nelbog Steve. Nelbog Steve. And Steve asks, what efforts are being made by the interim government to get the emerging defense groups to work with the DOD? Now, the DOD stands for the interim government, Department of Defense. What efforts are being made by the interim government to get the emerging defense groups to work with the DOD? Now, there are other defense questions here which I may just like to read all of them before I bring you the answer. Beset Funger writes, wow, I can't miss this live broadcast. What is the interim government doing to put these? Well, I will go back to that. That's not defense. Now, this question comes from Martins Ambendu. And he writes, our people are being terrorized by terrorist forces of occupation from La République du Cameroon. What measures are the interim government taking to contain this and practically drive away these occupation forces from our territory? Now, Nino Desby Noel also asks, why is the interim government not building up a military? Biya is not for peace. We have to engage in a war, as he declared already. All right, so those are a number of questions asked on the subject of defense. The question is, what efforts are the interim government putting in place to combat the occupational forces on the ground? What effort is the interim government putting in place to bring all the other self-defense groups on the ground together? Now, the question is simple. I said earlier that there are certain things we cannot put out here because they are of a classified nature. But I can assure you that the interim government is working with every self-defense group on the ground, trying to coordinate what they are doing. They are not all left on their own. That is what I can assure you. The interim government is aware of who is doing what on the ground for self-defense. As I said, the interim government has everything on the table, but it has not declared war yet. When the moment comes, it will not hesitate. But right now, the DOD is talking to people, the self-defense groups on the ground, trying to see what they are up to and what they are able to do. They are not neglecting them. They are not abandoning them. They are monitoring them. They are talking to them. They are working with them to see that they are able to do what they do without inflicting any damage on our own people. So the DOD is very much in charge of that. And I can assure you, the DOD is not resting. They are monitoring the situation on the ground on a daily basis. And they are also bringing reports back into the interim government. So the interim government is aware what is happening on the ground through the intelligence of DOD. What the Tigers are doing, what every other group is doing, the DOD monitors it, and they know exactly who is doing what and where they are doing it. So that is the kind of cooperation that is ongoing between the DOD and every other force on the ground. Even the ADF guys, I think the DOD is able to tell what they are up to, what their capabilities are, just as they have with every other group. And then let me go to the next question. And this question comes from for you Noel. My question is about education. When are we starting school in Ambazonia and how? Let the interim government give us definite dates or defined dates for our educational programs. People are complaining. Furthermore, we are being killed on a daily basis with a military occupation. Yet, the interim government is preaching diplomacy and even distancing itself from self-defense. Noel, I want you to understand, as I said from the beginning, the interim government has taken a stance on the education, on the school resumption issue, until the conditions that the interim government has stated are all met. We are not going to encourage anyone to send his or her child to school until the detainees are released, until Biya withdraws all the troops from Manfe and get all refugees back to their homes and ready to go to school. We are not ready to encourage anyone to send his or her child or children to school. As far as defense is concerned, again, I have said that every option is on the table. The DOD or the interim government is not against military action. The moment will come when they will execute that. But for now, we are monitoring and trying to work with the self-defense groups on the ground to see what they are able to do. That is what it is the interim government is doing now. Now, I take this other question from Sela Behen Rector. And he says, what is our vision concerning the resumption of schools? Again, it's the same question. What is our vision concerning the resumption of schools in the northwest and southwest region of our country, all the 14 counties? Of course, you heard from the president that schools will not resume until these conditions, the conditions prescribed, have been met. And you ask, what is the vision? I can assure you there is an elaborate vision for our schools, that has been tabulated. It is lying there just waiting for the moment to come for that program to be implemented. We are not folding, the interim government is not folding her hands and sitting here waiting when to get to Biya to begin to do things. The programs are in place and we are expecting to start implementing them the day we set foot on Biya. And so let me see, I can get take some live questions. The questions and the answers I have just taken were sent yesterday. Let me read some comments here from our viewers. This is Eugene Chene. Biya believes only in violence. Anything else doesn't bother him. These murderers are killing and maiming our children, and the interim government is busy doing appointments. My friend, I want you to understand, Chene, I want you to understand that the interim government needs hands to be able to do exactly what you expect them to do. And I also want you to understand that these appointments are not paid appointments. They are not paid positions. Everyone in the interim government is working as a volunteer. There is no way, impossible, for the interim government to achieve anything if we cannot have enough hands to work with us. In fact, right here at the communication department, we are looking for graphic designers, volunteers, who can do graphic design. We are looking for those who can write. Very soon we are launching our newspaper, Amazonia Times. We are looking for reporters, full-time reporters, people that will volunteer their time to write stories. We need these people who will come in and volunteer their time so that we can do exactly what you and others expect the interim government to do. So please, do not misunderstand. When you see the government is making appointments, the government needs hands, needs people to be able to achieve whatever we are set out to achieve. And Rosie Roland writes, we need to know the new curriculum formulated by the Educational Board. We really need to know. Yes, Rosie Roland, again, as I said a minute ago, that curriculum is in place. When the moment comes, in fact, one of these days, in the coming months, the Department of Education will probably be posting that curriculum on their website for everybody to have access to it. So I want to assure you that in a few months to come, if you go to the website of the Department of Education, you will be able to see that curriculum and you will love it. And Jaman Kim writes, how can we form defense groups? Kim, we can form defense groups by donating generously, or encouraging everybody to donate towards this struggle, towards this revolution. As I said from the beginning, everything is on the table, including defense. But it will take money, it will take financial resources if we can escalate any military action. And so the only way to fund defense in this government is to ask everybody, is to encourage everybody to go out there and donate. Go to the website, ambergov or amazoniagov.org. Encourage people to donate, to register and to donate. Again, you can get on the website and make a donation. As I said from the beginning, very soon a team will be going around the regions for fundraising. People can come out in those meetings and donate generously. Only donations will take us to Biya. And let me see, I can take two more questions here. My mouth is drying of speed. Okay. Yes, please. Marie Singer writes, what is your position as far as the meeting by some comrades in Maryland in a few days to come is? What is your position? So Marie Singer is asking, what is our position, the position of the interim government, as far as the meeting being organized in Maryland is concerned? Marie and everybody else out there, I want you to understand that the meeting in Maryland is not being organized by your interim government. The interim government does not object to any gathering by any groups who are fighting for the same purpose that this interim government is fighting for. And so, if anybody wants to put up a meeting somewhere, they are free to do it. If it pushes this struggle, we welcome it, we appreciate it, and we encourage people If you want to be there, you are free to do that. But the interim government is not organizing it, and the interim government will not be represented there. There are certain reasons behind that, but excuse me not to bring them here. But again, the interim government is not against any group or groups of people putting together a meeting that is geared towards the progress of this struggle. That is the position of the interim government. And let me take one more question. Prince de la Paix, he asks, why are videos of activists like Mark Barretta and other frontline leaders not aired on SCBC? Now, before I get to SCBC and to that question, I got another question that asks, who owns SCTV? Who owns SCTV? Now, I want you to know, SCTV, Southern Cameroon Television, is an online platform, an online network. It is not owned by the interim government. It is an individual initiative. In other words, it is owned by an individual. SCTV is different from SCBC. SCBC is owned by your interim government, but SCTV is owned by an individual and is basically online. Now, the question is, why are the videos of Mark Barretta's and others not being aired on SCBC television? Everybody, SCBC, as I said, is the people's television. And you will realize that SCBC had an open door policy. If you watch SCBC, you will discover that people from Europe, from London, from Belgium, from the US, they air their programming on SCBC. Mark Barretta was New Year's Eve on SCBC. Nothing bars him from doing a program on SCBC as far as the editorial policy of SCBC is followed. Now you have to understand, or we should understand this. SCBC has an editorial policy. SCBC was created to promote and to project this revolution, this struggle. And you can imagine for sure that we are not going to allow people that have different line of thinking to come on SCBC and air that line of thinking. That doesn't necessarily push the line of argument that we promote. For example, we are not going to allow anybody to come on SCBC and preach a unitary state. We are not also going to support anybody coming over SCBC to preach federalism. We are not for federalism. We will never be for federalism. We are for independence. And so why will we accept and allow people to come? Why will we accept and allow people who are federalists to come on SCBC? We will not allow federalist doctrine to be brought on SCBC. It is simple. If we do that, then we are no longer fighting for independence. Then we will no longer have a mission. That is the vision of SCBC, to promote the agenda of our independence, not any other agenda. But again, going back to your question, Mark Barretta is free to come on SCBC. In fact, he was there last 2 days ago. Others are free to come as long and as far as they are ready to toe the editorial policy of SCBC. I hope this makes sense to you. Now, before I go, I want to make this very important announcement. Coming up on the 12th of this month, just a week from now, I guess, on the 12th of this month, there is going to be a huge rally. In fact, it is taking place worldwide, whether in Asia, whether in Europe, whether in the US or in Canada. There is going to be a worldwide rally come together of all Amazonians. If you live in the New York area, there is going to be the New York chapter hosting a huge rally at the Times Square on January 12th. The time is 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Again, the venue is Times Square. The venue is Times Square, and the date is January 12th. Please, if you live in the New York area, consider coming out, sacrificing, and coming out. Let us send a message to the world that we will never be tired until we have seen our country completely actualized, our independence completely actualized. So please, we are making an appeal. If you live in the New York area, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Connecticut, Rhode Island, even Boston, New Hampshire, please consider joining this rally in New York on January 12th. Let us come together and send a message to the international community that we are still struggling after 56 years to be a nation. Let's present to the world the afflictions that have been brought upon us, inflicted upon us by la République du Cameroon. Again, the date is January 12th. The time is 2 p.m. through 5 p.m. and venue is Times Square in New York. Then, on January 19th, in Maryland, there is also going to be a huge rally for all Amazonian youths in that vicinity. If you're a young man within the age of 10 and up to 35, please, they want you to come out. Come out and show your face. Come out and stand for your country. Come out and carry the flag of Amazonia. And let the world know we are not a free people. Let the world know that we have been cheated. Let the world know that in the 21st century, we are still being colonized by la République du Cameroon. Let's take that message to the world until the world hears us and begin to answer our cry and recognize us as a nation in the United Nations. I am so glad that you tuned in today to listen to me. This wasn't a perfect show. I hope it gets better as we go on. We are putting together a better environment, a better setup, a better studio for these shows. And as I said from the beginning, I'll be doing this every week. You have your questions, send them to me, I'll answer them. I will be doing this every week. We are putting a studio together where we have a better setting, a better environment, and you will have the optimum of this broadcast. But I want to thank all of you. I am seeing 421 people watching right now. It got up to close to 550 at the moment. And I want to appreciate you staying in there, watching and listening to me. I will come back to you again this same time next week. Thanks for tuning in.